Joining me now is a talented writer, journalist, voiceover artist. His latest book is With Thanks to Superman. I'm just going to say, with thanks to author Brian McKernan. Brian, thank you so much for joining me today on Comic Book Central.
Oh, you're very, very welcome. Thank you
I'll
for
hold it
inviting
up. You don't
me.
have to hold up. Yeah, look, there we go. There's you. There's
That's
you
it.
right there. And there's
That's it.
Superman. If you're watching the YouTube version, we got you and Superman. Look, I love these author interviews that I'm doing. I'm doing a bunch of them in a row. I love when folks take their passions and put them to paper because then I can keep it in with all the other books that I have too. So this is
Right.
this is a fun one. Tell us about your latest book here. This with thanks to Superman. Why are you thanking Superman? What did he do for you?
Well, it dawned on me last year that what a role Superman has played in my life. Quite remarkable, really. I think it's easy to take the character for granted, but when you begin to look at all the pieces, it's remarkable how ubiquitous the character is. For my own part, this book is really 40 years worth of articles, observations, interviews. And I was looking at my hard drive, all of these Superman things that I'd written over the years. I was at Omni Magazine in 1983. I don't know if anybody remembers Omni. It was a science and science fiction magazine. I interviewed Christopher Reeve in 1983, in March of 83, a few months before Superman 3 came out. And so I published an interview in Omni, which was at the time a major publication. I later went on to be the editor of a magazine called Videography, which was a professional video production magazine for the corporate video, television industry, what have you, web video, all of the above. And time and again, I found myself in a position to write articles about Superman related television programs and content. For instance, the Broadway video 50th anniversary TV special on CBS in February 1988.
Was that
The super
was it hosted by Dana I think it was it the Dana
Yes,
Carvey thing? Yeah, Dana Carvey's in it, like a
yes,
bunch of comedians, like a lot of SNL folks at the
yeah,
time, or
yeah. It
yeah,
was
improv people. Yeah,
Broadway Video, which is Lorne Michaels, who is the producer of Saturday Night Live.
right.
So
Gee, that's how
all
he got so many from Saturday Night
that's
Live.
it. Yeah. Few phone calls and he's got a cast. So there
Sure.
was that. There was the Superboy television series
Right, right.
in 1988, which I visited the set a couple of times while editor
Okay.
of Videography magazine. Superboy was quite interesting and historically significant because it was really a proving ground for so much of the new digital technologies. It was really one of the first television shows to make extensive use of digital post production. Right around the same time, Star Trek: The Next Generation was doing the same thing. In fact, the same company, the Post Group, originally did the post not only for Star Trek: The Next Generation in Los Angeles, but in Orlando at Disney MGM for Superboy. They moved it over to Universal a year later, and a company called Century 3 Teleproductions did the post production. So that was significant to our readership, and I was able to visit the set and see the production, or at least see the post production part of it. And I'd also written an article for Videography. One of the great things about being the editor is you can choose what you want to write.
The
I
subject
did it
matter. Yeah.
absolutely. I did an article for Videography in October of 94 about the post production on Lois and Clark, which was done at
Okay.
Digital Magic in Los Angeles. And they took digital post to the next level for that
Hmm.
show. Both Superboy and Lois and Clark were shot on 35 millimeter film, motion picture style. But in post production, they were done digitally, which enabled the producers to accomplish a great deal more in terms of visual effects
Right.
that would have been cost prohibitive had they been done as traditional film opticals.
Yeah.
So
The early days,
these
it was
were
like sort of the early days of CGI, that was
yeah,
coming in
well,
there.
it was there was CGI was involved. In fact, I think if I'm not mistaken, one of the first uses of CGI in an episodic television program was an episode of Superboy,
Hmm.
and they used what was called the symbolics system at the time. I know that Laser Pacific in Hollywood also did some CGI on the there was a Twilight Zone revival show,
Oh,
which
okay, that's right.
did not last very long. That was
Right, right,
probably about 87, 88
right.
thereabouts. But Superboy used some CGI early on as well. So it was quite historic in terms of its use of new technologies to achieve the visuals that the producers required.
It
I'm
was
going to,
definitely ahead of its time, when you go in, but, here's the thing, you even reference this in your book, the fact that I don't know
yeah,
if you can see behind me, but there's a ton of books. So you reference this in your
yes,
book that there are a ton of Superman books out there, like,
yes,
all the history of Superman. Does everybody need another Superman book? And I think the hook on this one, and why we're talking about it, is the fact that this is almost a personal journey of yours and how that character is not only impacted other media. We talk about, radio, music, I think you touch on, we talk
yes.
about the films, the television shows, but your personal journey along with it. And I think that that is what differentiates this book. How early was it that you became fascinated with the character? Do you recall how and when you first developed a love of Superman and then started to get into all these other ancillary things?
Yeah, I'm 70 years old, which means I was born in 54 when the show was in production. I
This is the
was
George
watching
Reeves, The
the
Adventures of
George Reeves
Superman. Right.
Adventures of Superman. So I was watching it probably from the time I was, able to sit in front of a television set, maybe
Yeah.
the age of one, on,
And where was this? Where
WPI,
were you born and raised? You
the
were
Bronx, New York, in the Bronx,
okay. So
New York
it's a
City.
little Brian's up in the Bronx and just staring at the warm glow coming off the TV. It was George Reeves.
Well, what I mentioned my age because you have to understand at that time there was nothing else comparable to the Adventures of Superman. This was
Right.
live action a superhero television program. There were no other live action superhero television programs. They didn't exist. I mean,
Right.
somebody's going to write in and say, "What about Flash Gordon?" Flash Gordon's not a superhero. I'm sorry. The next the next
Now
live
you might
action
be in dangerous territory there. I
uh,
just got done with an episode about movie serials. So super. So we'll leave that for another. We'll leave that for another one.
yeah,
But go ahead.
the same goes for the Lone Ranger, which,
And Tarzan. I know I've had this debate
yeah, so
over and
in
over
any
again.
case, it wasn't until I was 12 and Batman came on in 1966 that there was a second live action superhero program. There were no cartoons. There were no, the Superman cartoons did not debut until October 66 on CBS.
Right.
There were Marvel cartoons that debuted in 1966, which were, like illustrated radio. The animation was so limited.
Yeah, they actually
Uh,
took the panels right from the comic books and just like
right,
moved the
right,
mouth.
yeah. They
Right,
didn't
right.
even move the mouth. But so my point is that for, a huge part of my childhood, there was nothing else but The Adventures of Superman, and
Yeah.
frankly, it was just a remarkable show. I know that it was, people something that really irks me. People say it was cheap. The show was so cheap. I got news for you. All television is cheap. Take a look at The Honeymooners, the cardboard sets. Take a look at I Love Lucy. They never,
Right.
leave the soundstage.
Right. Right.
Superman, The Adventures of Superman had location photography. It had, half the character players from Warner Brothers were guest stars on the thing. Dan Seymour,
Mhm.
Elijah Cook Jr., just, an amazing array of talent.
The special
And
effects.
the
Yeah.
special effects, it was for what they were at the time, they were fabulous. I mean,
Yeah.
they were that was the first television series with motion picture style optically printed special effects.
Yeah.
And I've seen comparisons between the Christopher Reeve movies, which I love.
Mhm.
The flying in that, and I've seen the intercut between the two, and I swear you can't really tell the difference. The color episodes of the flying on the Adventures of Superman and the Christopher Reeve films. I mean, they both look. I mean, my point is that the Superman television series of the 50s, the flying effects, most of them, I mean, they look fantastic. They look
Especially if you
excellent.
hold Superman 4 up against the George Reeves era, because
Yeah,
then you might
yeah.
even get a closer comparison.
Well, that was a I have great fondness for that film. I mean, it
I
took me
do
years
too.
years to develop a great fondness, but any Superman movie with Christopher Reeve is a
Yep.
good Superman movie.
Yep.
So, but in any
I agree.
case, so for what seemed like eternity, that was the only game in town, The Adventures of Superman. That fascinated me. Summertime, I read comic books, and to a young mind, these small four-color panels took on CinemaScope proportions. So, DC had me right where they wanted me right from the
Mhm.
start. It was the television series, and in the summertime, it was the comic books. I had the good fortune, my family owned a house on an eastern Long Island, and we had no television there. There was no television service, and we're talking the late 1950s, early
Mhm.
1960s. So, everyone read, and I read comic books, and just drew developed this love for DC, Superman, Batman, these wonderful illustrators and writers who created all these, I guess that would be called Silver Age stories.
Mhm.
So, that's where the fascination began. And it stayed with me ever since. And in 2003, I had the good fortune, thanks to a gentleman named Chuck Carter and his associate Steve McCracken, and I went to Metropolis in 2003
Well, you're jumping a
to,
little bit ahead. I want to
yeah, I
walk
am
up to
jumping ahead.
that.
Okay.
Yeah, that's
Well,
no worries. 'Cause, well, we had Chuck on the show, and he was fascinating too. He has a
oh
new
yeah,
book.
Chuck is a great guy.
Well, I want to
So
you
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 can
mentioned
continue with your questions.
no, that's okay. You mentioned the Omni Magazine. I kind of want to get into because this was
Yeah,
so if so for like some of the maybe younger viewers or listeners out there right now,
right,
it set the stage in 1983 because you had the first Superman movie. You can see those behind me, the posters. You know, the first
right.
Superman movie, the second one came out, and then 1983. You're writing for Omni Magazine, which is very scientific, tech based. There's some
But
science
also
fiction.
published science fiction,
Right, they
and
had
it
that in
took
there.
it took things such as Superman very seriously, which
Yeah.
Superman is a serious, science fiction construct.
But there was a nice hook, and this was the key with Superman 3 is that home computers, like, this brand new thing of home computers, we were all,
Yes,
fascinated with Atari and, the Radio
yes,
Shack was around. So that really kind of gave you a unique in
it
on
did.
this interview. So, and there was also a unique way you landed the interview, which I don't know how much you want to get into that. It's in the book, but maybe you could
Oh,
just tease
sure,
that a
yeah.
little bit for the listeners
Well,
out there.
yeah, I would love to tell that story.
Yeah.
I was attempting to work with the Warner Brothers PR people, who at the time I'm sure were the most wonderful folks in the world, but really not getting anywhere. So a friend of mine who worked on a TV show that people our age may remember called PM Magazine
Mhm.
and had interviewed, he's actually the novelist Stephen Schindler, who has published a wonderful series of novels with the Elevated Press. His latest is called Fallout Shelter. He recommended the following. He said, Chris Reeve is either going to be with International Creative Management or the William Morris Agency. You work at Omni Magazine. Call them up. Tell them you need the Chris Reeves secretary's phone number. So I did, and bingo, that worked. I think the first company I called, I can't remember which, whether it was William Morris or ICM,
Right.
and I got the number, and I called the secretary, lovely young lady, and she had a bad cold. I could hear it over the phone. And she said, "Well, I don't know. He's really busy with a lot of things." And I said, "Do you have a cold?" And she said, "Oh yeah, you can tell." And I said, "Yeah, I'm going to send you something because we used messengers. I was in
Mhm.
Manhattan over on Third Avenue and 54th Street. Chris Reeve was over on, I guess he lived on Columbus Avenue across from the Museum of Natural History. So I had a messenger bring her a jar of powdered vitamin C. She called me up about an hour later and said, "That was so nice of you to do that." And I said, "Well, a cold is a miserable thing. And my wife gives me powdered vitamin C when I have a cold, and it was March and that time of year we get colds and what have you." So she said, "Well, I'll see what I can do." So my phone rang about I don't know, 45 minutes later, and there's Chris Reeve on the other end of the line. And
That's
he's
great.
like, I mean, we're about a year, we were about a year and apart in age.
Yeah.
So, we were on the same wavelength. It was a great conversation. He hadn't seen the finished Superman 3 movie,
Right.
nor had I,
Yeah.
but I had read that it had to do with computers. And of course, Omni Magazine was all about computers. And we started on that angle, and it was quite interesting because as the interview in the book, and in fact, the Omni Magazine article, the interview, I edited the interview in kind of a prose style
Mhm.
report. The book, I've got the original uncut interview, which has got,
That's you tapped into it, and I think that's the
yeah,
hook of this book because I went back. It's on Internet Archive, the original. So I went back and read it and
right,
wanted to see how it compares. And it's like, yeah,
yeah,
you can read the article. It's kind of cool, and you got quotes here, and it's you
yeah,
talking about it. But this is the actual unedited.
right,
This is a conversation. This is basically just a conversation with Christopher Reeve,
yes,
where you're mentioning things that he might not even want to be revealed yet about the movie. And it's
yes,
interesting the self-editing that you're doing in the process. So this would never land in a magazine, but
correct,
man, does it play out fun to feel like you're having a conversation with Christopher Reeve
yeah,
in
yeah,
in in one of the weirdest eras, like that 83 computer thing, with Richard
right,
Pryor and all the anyway, it's
and
fun.
it was fun. I mean, Reeves said things like he hates video games, thinks
Yeah,
they're a waste of time.
he doesn't have a computer, he's I have a calculator or
Right,
something. I
right.
have one of
I
those
use it
calculators that does
when I'm flying the airplane, but otherwise I
yes.
don't have a computer, you know. And we
Yeah,
were just getting computers in the office at Omni. So
right.
you know, it was
It's
it was a changing times, I should say. But
fantastic.
but
Another
I'm
gem I
glad you
want
like
to
it.
talk another gem I want to talk about is right before Reeve, but after Reeves. So we always want to be careful, if the S is
Right,
on the chest, right?
right,
Um, let's talk about Bob Holliday, Broadway's Superman. I
right.
don't want to give away too many specifics, but can you kind of give us a little overview of, and this is where you were launching into with the 2003, I think, right? It kind of
Right.
culminates
Yes.
in that. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. 1966, after coming off of writing the Broadway musical Golden Boy, or doing the music for it, Charles Strauss and Lee Adams, it was a challenging assignment because the star was Sammy Davis Jr., who was a major star and very particular with how his performance went. It was a challenge to them, and they wanted to do something that was more fun and easier. Not that Sammy Davis Jr. wasn't a fabulous star and a fun guy, but they wanted to do something fun. And there were two writers for Esquire magazine that had a yearly feature called the Dubious Distinction Awards, and those two guys were David Newman and Robert Benton, both of whom went on to do many other things, such as the movie Bonnie and Clyde and Kramer versus Kramer. In any case, Leslie Newman, David's wife, picked up one of her son's comic books off her son's bedroom floor one day and said, "Hey, this is a Superman comic book. This would make a really great idea for a Broadway musical." Well, next thing you know, they're writing that very thing. Strauss and Adams doing the music, Newman and Benton writing the script, or as they call it, the book.
Mhm.
And It's a Bird, It's a Plane, It's Superman premiered March 30th, I believe. Hope I got that date right, or 29th, 1966 at the Alvin Theater on Broadway. And the critics loved it. It had played out of town trials in Philadelphia, where the critics were kind of mixed, but they loved it. And unfortunately, Batman on television with Adam West
Mhm.
had premiered in January, just a few weeks before Superman.
Yeah, Batman 66 sounds familiar. A
Yeah,
little bit, yeah.
theater going audiences felt, why should I pay to see Superman
Right.
when I can watch the same thing for free Wednesday and Thursday nights on ABC? Now, of course, the Superman Broadway musical had a different tone to it. It was not as high camp as the Batman television
Mhm.
series, which, by the way, when I was 12, I just loved. And of course, it's great fun to watch these days too,
Mhm.
all these years later. But matinee audiences for It's a Bird, It's a Plane, It's Superman were packed with young folks. Evening audiences, not so much, because again, adult theater goers just thought that, well, this is like Batman. I've already seen that. Also, this was an era when the competition on Broadway included some of the greatest musicals in history. Fiddler on the Roof, Cactus Flower, Man of La Mancha. I mean, just
Yeah.
unbelievable, wonderful shows.
Tough
So
competition for a guy in tights being swung
yeah,
from the
well,
ceiling, right?
but Bob Holliday was cast as Superman. Bob had been in a show called Fiorello several years earlier, which was about the mayor of New York City in the 1930s, or I guess 40s, late 30s, LaGuardia, and had done great. And he was a perfect Superman, 6 foot, good looking, muscular, sang well. And unfortunately, people today don't seem familiar with Bob Holliday. Every
Isn't he kind
time
of like the forgotten Superman? It was
he's
like
really
they'd always
very
say it was
much
the
the
forgotten
forgotten
one.
Superman. Yeah, I would
Right.
say, which is unfortunate because there's no
Right.
reason why that should be.
No,
And
he was perfect.
he was perfect. And I've had people say, well, he didn't appear in a film, which is not true because he did appear in a film. There was a film shown with every performance called The Story
Right.
of Superman, which was a newsreel that Lois Lane shows to the villain of the story,
Hmm.
a 10-time Nobel Prize loser named Dr. Abner Sedgwick, who wishes to take his revenge on the world by destroying Superman.
Hmm.
And he teams up, Sedgwick does, with Max Minkin, who is played by the wonderful Jack Cassidy, if anybody
Yeah.
remembers Jack Cassidy, who is the Daily Planet gossip columnist. And
Hmm.
the two of them conspire to destroy Superman. But there was Bob Holliday live on stage, flying on one single wire,
Yeah. He was doing
doing
it. That wasn't a stunt man. And then you
he was
stuck
doing it,
behind.
no
He was
stuntman.
doing it.
Yeah.
Right.
And actually, he had one evening where the wire snapped
Hmm.
and it dropped him about 6 feet. He landed on his rear. He stood right back up and he said to the audience, "That would have hurt an immortal man." And he got a standing ovation. And the show just continued.
Yeah.
And
He was great.
Bob was a trooper. The following summer, he did again the role of Clark Kent and Superman in outdoor open air performances in both Kansas City and St. Louis. And Bob was hung from a construction crane 100 feet above the stage. He came flying in.
It's crazy. It's crazy.
Amazing. And I said to him years later, I said, "Did you realize the risk you were taking?" And Bob said, when you're that age, you're so gung ho, you really don't think about it.
Yeah. Yeah. Well,
But
that's the perfect Superman.
looking back, um, I guess I was. But exactly, you're right. He really was the perfect Superman. He was heavily into the role, heavily committed to the role. He would have kids in the audience visit him
Yeah.
after each performance. They could pose for pictures backstage, and you can see all of this stuff on Bob's website, which is maintained lovingly by Ms. Tony Valesky Collins. The website is
It's
www.
supermanbobholiday.com. Yeah.
That's it, supermanbobholiday.com. We've also got the Bob Holliday Broadway Superman Facebook page, which I
Yes.
encourage everybody to visit as well.
And
So,
all this stuff's out there, like the videos you're talking about
yeah,
and all the
yeah. So there's
background. And Tony was even nice enough. I know prior to his passing, I was hoping to have him on the show. And Tony was nice
right.
enough to pay, unfortunately his health, wasn't up for a podcast interview. But she passed along and we read that greeting that he had to the fans. So he was just amazing. But in the book, you talk about like you're just sort of meeting up with him, and there's it's what Holiday in Metropolis. So this is like the Superman celebration we know that takes place in Metropolis, Illinois,
Yes,
every year. 2003, he visited, I think, Noel Neal, the great Noel Neal.
right.
And speaking about
Yvonne
Batman
Craig.
66, Yvonne Craig, Batgirl
Yvonne
was there
Craig.
too. So I wonder if they like, butted heads over, your show took my Broadway show. I don't know.
No, no,
But
they
that would
all
have
they
been,
all got along
they'll get along great.
wonderfully. All got
But
along
that's all
wonderfully.
detailed in here too
Right.
about that sort of interaction of you coming in and shooting a documentary, and
Right, sure.
that's
Well,
all laid out in here.
that was all Chuck Harder's doing. He was the
Yeah.
mastermind of this whole thing. And he realized that the 1966 Broadway Superman had not yet been a guest at Metropolis. So he got together with the Metropolis people, with Jim Hambrick and the Super Museum, and had Bob Holliday assigned to be one of the celebrity guests that year at the Superman celebration. And Chuck and Bob said, we want to shoot a documentary on this. So that was the responsibility of Steve McKernan,
Hmm.
who is an excellent videographer, not just a videographer, but a brilliant producer, editor. He had one camera, I had another. We shot the documentary. We just captured footage on the fly, and later on, in the ensuing months, Steve and his brilliant editing talents put it all together in a wonderful hour-long video. This is the DVD.
Oh, the DVD there too. Yeah. And it's on
Yeah,
YouTube, right? Holiday in Metropolis.
it
If you
is.
just
It's
Google
on. You can
Holiday
find
in
it on
Metropolis.
YouTube, so you don't
Yeah.
need the DVD necessarily. But
Or get the DVD. You got physical
well,
media. You never know when streaming stuff goes away. So that's
yeah,
why I
that's
always have
true.
physical media behind me. Yeah.
Well, I have to say it's very hard to find this because there was only a limited number that were duplicated. So very hard to find. But so hopefully YouTube will the YouTube
Yeah.
version will stay there. But it was a wonderful experience. Bob had a great time.
Yeah.
And
Oh, you can
loads
tell.
of people remembered him. And even though, as far as we know, no film or video was ever made of the original 1966 production.
Right.
The original cast recording has never been out of print. It's on CD. You can find it on YouTube.
I
You
have
can
it on
find it
vinyl
on you got it
upstairs.
on
I've got the original
vinyl.
vinyl. Yeah. Like
Never
old
been out
school. I
of
told you,
print.
no school like old school.
Yeah, and new school too. I mean, you can get it on
Yeah.
iTunes and all the streaming services. It's a bird, it's a plane, it's Superman. Terrific score, lots of fun. People in Metropolis loved it. Bob had a great time, and it was a very memorable experience.
You can tell, and the thing that's great about this book that I really want people to understand too is that when you think about people like Noel Neal and Bob Holliday and Yvonne Craig, they're not with us anymore. Christopher Reeve, and so that's some of the people. Thing when people talk to me is like, who do you want as a guest? I want the ones that I can't get on, the ones that are gone. I would love to have George Reeves. I would love to have Christopher Reeve. I would love to have
Sure.
Noel Neal. These these are that's part of what I like to do about Comic Book Central is that we're documenting these interviews, we're documenting
Yes.
these pieces of time, but you've got them here in the book. So for those ones that we don't have around with us anymore, you have those conversations in there. It's detailed. You mentioned Superboy, the Superboy TV series. There's an interview with Gerard Christopher. He is with
Yes.
us. We had
Right.
him on the show. So, but it's nice that we've got that archive in here. The George Reeves era you mentioned is covered through other cast members. We mentioned, Noel Neal, but family members, right? Siegel and Schuster, the creators of Super. It's like on and on. You tap in almost everything. Superman in music, Superman in radio.
Yeah, it
Like,
just was a remarkable radio series, the Superman radio series. And,
right.
I was able to tell the story of Fred Shea, who heroically had transferred very brittle, fragile transcriptions of the original 1940 Superman radio show to tape. Had he not done that, we would not have those recordings today. Another gentleman, Sid Fried-Fertig, who scoured the world to find the Superman newspaper strip, which DC, amazingly enough, never archived. They never saved all of these strips, decades worth of the Superman newspaper strip that ran from what 1940, I think it was, to 1966, revived again years later in 78. But Sid Fried-Fertig heroically scoured archives in Europe and the US to find these strips, to have them restored. They were first, a group of them published by the Kitchen Sink Press and then IDW, the Library of American Comics. We're hoping that we'll see new editions in the future. I think the interest is certainly there. People, for instance, would love to see the continuity from the 1950s of the Steve Allen show, Superman story. Steve Allen was a forerunner to Jimmy Kimmel, pardon me, on
Oh, Jimmy
NBC.
Fallon. Yeah, Jimmy Fallon.
Jimmy
Yeah,
Fallon, Jimmy Fallon,
going back to even precursor to
before
Johnny
Carson.
Carson. Yeah, he's before
Sure.
Carson on the Tonight Show, right?
And there was a whole story in the Superman newspaper strip because Steve Allen resembled Clark Kent so strongly, complete with the glasses,
Mhm.
that he became a character. And it's a great story. We'd love to see that republished.
Yeah.
And so we're hoping someday that will be in book form. But anyway, Fred and Sid, the radio program with Fred and the newspaper strip with Sid, these guys did heroic work to save those famous, notable, important Superman media chapters from oblivion and make them available to us. You can buy these Superman reprints, and you can buy the, listen to the Superman radio series. And it was, really the forerunners that created the character that we know today. Each different version built upon the other. The
That's
radio, the
what
television,
it's exactly it. Yep, that's why I
and
like
the
the
Broadway.
serials, all those things, the
Right.
Broadway, they're all stepping stones to get us to where we are. That's why I love them. Even the superhero roast, or even the we talked about off mic, this 1975 TV special. I like there's a
Yeah.
fondness in my heart for the characters. There's Spidey Super
Sure.
Stories and Electric Company, when we see cheesy superheroes, we still love all those things that brought these things to life.
Sure.
In the time
Sure.
we have left, I got to ask you, they're talking about James Gunn is, rebooting the whole Superman movie, Superman
Yeah.
Legacy. He's going back apparently and watching like the Donner Reeve era of movies to get some inspo,
That's good
So,
news.
well, what do you think? I mean, are you
Well, I hope,
hopeful?
yeah, well, I'm hopeful, certainly.
Okay.
I think, he's smart enough and Warner Brothers is smart enough to realize what appeals to people, and what appeals to people is the Christopher Reeve version of Superman. Superman is bright. Superman is colorful. Superman is hope. Superman is not darkness. Superman is optimism. And, Superman is you should come out of the theater feeling elated, which is what all of the Christopher Reeve movies made you feel, which is what, the Kirk Allen serials made you feel, the George Reeves television series of the 50s,
He
the
would wink at the camera. He'd like look at, like,
exactly,
of course,
exactly.
Lois. And yeah, it was fun. It was
John
it
Ames
was
Newton
cheeky.
and Gerard Christopher on Superboy, all
Yes.
positivity. To make this into a dark character wearing a rubber wetsuit, with a cape dragging behind him, like he looks like, a queen of some country with the, it just, it was that
Felt
particular
heavy.
director. Yeah, it was, I mean, Zach, whatever his
Zack
name is,
Snyder.
Snyder. I mean,
Hmm.
that was his version. I didn't like it. I think a lot of people didn't like it. Some people loved it. We can all agree to disagree. But I certainly hope Mr. Gunn is going to go back to the reasons that make Superman world famous and, beloved all over the globe. I mean, they, supposedly don't like Americans very much in Iran. Yet Superman was used for a banking commercial because, everybody loves Superman. Soundproof window replacement windows in Russia. There was a Superman print advertisement for those. Optician
Well, that
ad
takes me
in Argentina. It's just this character is loved all over the world, and for very good reasons. He's all about helping out.
into your face. You mentioned the Bob Holliday Broadway Superman Facebook page. I also want to mention Superman in Advertising and Media. That's
Yes,
another Facebook. So all those things you're talking about are there.
yes,
So there we go. And then what's next? So we got this book. We get this on Amazon. We're gonna order this
right.
on Amazon. What's next? What's coming up next for you?
Well, I don't want to talk about things necessarily. You don't want to, premature to do
Right,
that.
right.
But there's always new things in the pipeline, and every day on Superman in Advertising and Media, my Facebook group, part of the Caped Wonder network of Facebook groups. Um, I post different images to point out the ubiquity of Superman in terms of the media. He's everywhere. I mean, today, just some random film frames of different movies over the years in which characters were wearing a Superman T-shirt. Speaking of which, by the way, I'm wearing my Bob
The
Holliday
Bob Holiday, you got it on there. If you're watching on
S.
YouTube, you can see
Yeah,
it.
that's
That's
it.
right.
That's from Charlie
I went
Rose.
with the Christopher Reeve. Yeah, I went with the Christopher Reeve myself on
Yeah,
Cape to Wonder.
yeah, yeah. Cape One. Charlie Rose makes these wonderful T-shirts, and he makes a Christopher Reeve version, and a Bob Holliday version, and a
They're
George Reeves
amazing.
version. But in any case, it's just as I pointed out in today's entry, major corporations spend a lot of money just paying for product placement in movies to have their logo visible. This has been going on with Superman for decades, and they never had to pay a dime for that because he's so universally known and loved that it's not uncommon to see a movie where there's a character wearing a Superman T-shirt, just
Yeah.
incidentally, like Nighthawks, Billy D. Williams, for instance, or I saw a Beach Boys documentary recently, or A Star Is Born, the version with Barbara Streisand. She's wearing a Superman T-shirt. I mean, it's just over and over and over again. You realize just how beloved this character is,
Yeah.
and it's easy to take it for granted, but when you stop and think about it, it's quite remarkable. There really is no other character that this is true of that is so universally popular and recognized and familiar for advertisers, whether it's an ad that has had paid for permission to use Superman, or an ad that is kind of doing it, in a roundabout way, maybe showing something that looks like Superman. Advertisers all over the world know that if you want to indicate your product is the best, the greatest, the finest, you put an S on it. And how many times
That's
have we
it.
seen that, where
That's
there's an
it.
S on the character, on the item, whatever it may be? It might be cologne, it might be potatoes. Uh,
Kind of
and
go
that's
back
what
through.
Superman in advertising and media is all about.
Right. So that's the Facebook page. You even reference on
Right.
page 7, the reigning superhero of advertising and media. You got it. But it's fun to be on the Facebook page to go down the rabbit hole on some of these things, because before you know it, you're just lost in this sea of Superman advertising. So it's
Yeah.
fun to look at that. So we're going to visit those two Facebook pages. We're going to visit Bob Holiday, SupermanBobHoliday.com.
Bob Holliday, Broadway Superman.
And then you've got the with thanks to Superman, the book. We get that on Amazon. What, you got a website? What else we what else we want to plug here? Plug away.
Well,
What else you got?
I have a website for my voiceover and audiobook narration.
Yes,
It's
the super voiceovers that you do, right?
brianmckernan.com. There you go. You can see the
That
work
is
that
it.
I've done, and not to be too self-serving, but no, really, this is a fascinating character, and
Yeah.
it has fascinated me my entire 70 years almost. And I don't really think there's another character that is quite so familiar to people all over the world, and quite so well thought of all over the world.
Yeah.
And I mean, I know somebody who, a terrific gentleman who had a heart transplant, and said just watching Superman the movie helped him survive it, just because of how uh, elated he felt
Mhm.
after watching it, and how positive it made him feel, in terms of mind over body, and so I think it's a rather remarkable character. I know that there are fans of many other characters, and with all due respect, they all have a place.
Yeah.
But
There's
Superman
only
was the
one
first,
Superman. There's
and
only
there's
one
only one.
Superman.
He
And
was the
like you said,
first,
there's a
arguably.
brightness. There's a brightness. There's a lightness to the character. There's a
Yeah,
hopefulness to
yeah,
the character. And so many times throughout history that you've seen that in the radio shows and in the
yes,
television shows and the movies, the cartoons, Super Friends on a Saturday morning, the
sure,
action figures, everything that's surrounding me if you watch on YouTube. All
right,
that's out there. And I think that really comes through in the book. And I think you've taken such a unique angle on it to show sort of one man's journey with the character, but you take us along for the ride, so we kinda get those glimpses into it along with you, and I
right,
think
right.
that that's
That's
a really, really nice hook to the book. So we're
Thank
gonna
you,
go get this. Brian, thank you so much for this book. Thank you for all the work you've done over the years, bringing us your insights on the character, and thank you so much for joining me on Comic Book Central to talk about it.
thank you, Joe. It was a pleasure, and as my friend Jim Bowers likes to say, stay super.
Yes, he does. That's right. We'll all stay super. Thanks
That's
so much.
okay. Thank you.